Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing Four Against the Great Old Ones. This is another entry into the pen and paper RPG series Four Against Darkness, and this particular entry is designed by Marco Arnaudo. Four Against the Great Old Ones is a new entry into the Four Against Darkness series, but this one is a standalone. So it's basically Four Against Darkness meets the Cthulhu mythos, and the designer is Marco Arnaudo, who you might know as Marco Wargamer or now Marco Omnigamer. So his enthusiasm for the series and for the Lovecraft mythos has come together to make this little solo pen and paper RPG. You can also play it with other people if they just want to control other characters. But basically the point of the game is that, also I really like the book. I think the PDF is easier to print from, so it might be more practical, but ooh, book. But basically the concept of the game is that you have a team of 4 investigators, and what y'all are trying to do is assemble clues and figure out which old one a bunch of cultists are trying to summon so that you can stop them and thus save the world. You have to get a certain number of clues, figure out who you're confronting, and have your final old one confrontation within 40 days within the game. And that is going to go by a lot quicker than you think because it takes time to travel, it takes time to recruit people to your party, certain events will cause time to pass, and you're basically going to constantly feel pressed to get everything that you need done before it's time to either have a final confrontation or be frustrated that you didn't get enough clues. So for setup, you're basically going to get to choose from some cool characters like the occultist or the medium, the professor or the spy, the veteran, the gangster, or the private detective. Your 4 investigators will also be able to hire helpers who can join the party. And so you'll be balancing everybody's sanity, ability to harm the undead, their fighting abilities, their investigative abilities. You're going to have to kind of figure out how to build out your party the way you want. One of the challenges to that, of course, is that because Marco Arnaudo takes the Lovecraft theme of the game seriously, a lot of your investigators and helpers are just going to die a lot. So you're basically trying to avoid a party wipe so you don't lose the game, but you should expect for people to die and for you to have to hire new ones, which of course takes time, which you don't have enough of in the game. So this game is actually very dangerous for your party characters, and so you shouldn't get too attached to them because I just wouldn't. Combat is really simple, and it is very much based on the same D6 system that regular Four Against Darkness is based on. And if you've never played Four Against Darkness, just know that combat is very simple. It's not too tough to resolve attacks and defense against enemies. And unlike in Four Against Darkness, this one doesn't require you to draw out a dungeon or anything. So you're very much imagining combat and rolling dice as opposed to having to do anything tactically complex. Most of what you'll be doing throughout the game is going around the map, and of course it takes time to get from location to location because time is of the essence in this game. And then as you visit different locations, you're going to roll a die and do things that correspond with your die roll in those locations. So you will have different kinds of encounters, you'll have a chance to pick up different kinds of artifacts and get experience for different battles you might have. Basically everything that happens in this game will happen according to a series of charts. So visit a place, roll to see what happens on the chart. There are also charts for arcane items that you might get, gates you might pass through, and things that might happen in the Dreamlands. Because of course this is Lovecraft. While you're traveling around the map, you're going to be collecting items and doing other things that'll get you clues. And what the clues do is they tell you which of the great old ones you're going to have to fight in order to beat the game. And what's interesting about the clue system in this particular iteration of Four Against Darkness is that it really does feel like you are finding clues and piecing together what's going to happen. So here for the final encounter, you can see, you can discard arcane items, you can discard 2 copies of the same arcane item, you can acquire a clue from a text, but essentially you need to collect 3 clues to be able to access your final encounter. Every time you get a clue, you roll a d6 and you make a note of that result. And so if you're rolling low, you can actually guess from the clues as you go on through the game that it might be somebody on the lower end of the spectrum. If you're rolling really high, you might end up with someone like Cthulhu as your final encounter. So the final encounter really does change according to the clues that you manage to discover in the game. And while you won't be able to figure out who you're fighting from one clue, as the clues assemble, you get a much better sense of what to prepare for, and that was an element of the game that I thought was really cool. The other thing that I will warn you about is that because this game is very serious about its Cthulhu origins, really bad things can happen to you in here in terms of becoming lost in other dimensions or just losing all of your sanity. And there are moments of frustration that I personally find hilarious because they so deeply reflect the Cthulhu mythos. But be prepared. Having good knowledge of Lovecraft's work and paying attention to spatial cues that you get from this game as you play it multiple times, that kind of knowledge is going to really help you and enrich your gaming experience. So if you want a very stripped down, bare bones, pen and paper RPG combined with Cthulhu, then this is a game that's well worth looking at. So let me take you to some final thoughts. So now for some final thoughts. If you already watched my reviews, you know that I'm a fan of For Against Darkness, and I think the series overall is really fun. I also think this might be my favorite entry yet. I'm really delighted with a lot of the things that it does. So I will warn you, this is one of those games that you have to explore a lot. When you first begin, it's like, well, I don't know what to do. You don't necessarily know where to go, and you have to just play it and see what happens. And so if you're not that kind of player, you might not enjoy it. But I thought that this was a really cool world to explore, and I like that the world seems to get richer and richer the more you play. As somebody who has read Lovecraft, I also really enjoyed a lot of the callbacks to the original literature and the ways in which this particular game is both embedded in the Lovecraftian world and also pushing back against it a little bit. Marco Arnaudo is a big fan of pop literature and of things like the Lovecraft mythos, and his knowledge really shows up in the game, but also his willingness to interpret and bend that literature is a major part of gameplay. And if you can fully enjoy that experience, it's really, really cool. The game in general is fun, it plays well, and especially if you're willing to be very imaginative, lots of really fun and hilarious things will pop up in here, especially if you get to some of the later encounters against the Great Old Ones. Each of them is very different and offers a different challenge, and some of them, honestly, I found hilarious. As I mentioned in my overview, I really liked the fact that the clue system does work like real clues, and there's a lot of attention that's kind of given to the fact that this game is meant to feel like an exploration, and it really does. It's also, however, possible that this isn't your type of game. I do think that after you play it several times and you start seeing some of the same encounters, like any game of this type, it'll eventually start to lose a little bit of flavor. Also, while you can play this game without a deep knowledge of Lovecraft, it definitely really improves the experience. It might not feel as exciting for you if you're not coming at it from a place of having read the literature and being able to catch all the Easter eggs. Because it is Lovecraftian, you should also prepare to occasionally be frustrated, but in a very thematic way, which I personally thought was great. So if you're looking for a really bare bones pen and paper RPG experience, but you also want some of that Lovecraft goodness, and you want to do something with the Cthulhu mythos, I think that For Against the Great Old Ones is an excellent choice for you. And overall, I give it an 8 out of 10 and a Dice Tower seal of approval. Happy gaming.